Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Always.
Today we're going down a rabbit hole, really deep one.
Ooh, I love a good rabbit hole.
This one's about the JFK assassination. But there's a twist.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me with it.
We're focusing on Elena Garro.
Elena Garro?
Yeah. A celebrated Mexican writer, not your usual suspect in this whole thing.
Definitely not who I was expecting. So what's the connection?
Well, she claimed she met Lee Harvey Oswald
Wow, okay.
just weeks before Dallas.
That's wild. I mean, think about it. A famous writer connected to the alleged assassin.
Right. You'd think her story would be huge.
Yeah, front page news for sure.
But it was practically ignored, dismissed as unreliable, even called disinformation.
That is strange.
So we're going to unpack Garro's story today.
Sounds good to me.
Look at the evidence, see if it sheds any light on the JFK assassination. Why do you think her story got swept under the rug like that?
Well, to really get it, we gotta picture Mexico City back then, right?
Okay, paint the scene for me.
Cold War Central, spies everywhere, intrigue around every corner.
Like a spy novel come to life.
Exactly. It was a hotbed. So Garro's story, it gets even more complicated against that backdrop.
I can only imagine. Okay, so rewind with me. Late September 1963, Oswald goes to Mexico City, supposedly trying to get visas for Cuba, maybe the USSR. That's where Garro's story comes in. She goes to a party at her cousin's, Ruben Duran.
Duran, wasn't he connected to the Cuban embassy somehow?
Oh yeah, big time. His brother-in-law's wife, Sylvia Duran, worked there.
Okay, so we got Garro, Duran, the Cuban embassy, all linked to Oswald.
And it's all happening weeks before the assassination.
This is getting interesting.
It's insane, right? At the party, Garro says she sees Oswald with two other Americans. She even described them.
And nobody believed her.
Nope. Skepticism all around. Why do you think that is? Just too crazy to be true.
Well, the Warren Commission, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, they basically threw out her story.
Yeah, they weren't buying it.
Said it was unreliable, maybe even made up to blame Cuba.
Trying to stir up trouble, you think?
Possibly. The Cold War was a tense time. Pointing fingers at Cuba could have been disastrous.
For sure. But looking at the sources, there are some details, some things that just don't add up.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Garro claimed she and her daughter, they were taken to this hotel, the Hotel Vermont, after the assassination.
For safety?
Yeah. She was afraid of, like, communist retaliation or something. Makes you wonder, right?
Yeah, it does. And there's more, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. Reports of other people from that party disappearing or suddenly getting protection, like they knew something they shouldn't.
That party sounds like the start of a whole lot of trouble.
It really does. And then there's this letter.
A letter?
Yeah, postmarked before Oswald officially arrived in Mexico City.
So the timeline's off.
It could be. It's like something's not quite right.
Intriguing, but circumstantial, right?
True, but you gotta admit, it makes you think. Was there something more to Garro's story, something the investigations missed?
It's possible. We are talking about Cold War espionage. Secrets and deception. That was their bread and butter.
Right, and could Garro, maybe without even knowing it, get mixed up in all of that?
Maybe she stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see.
That leads us to another fascinating character, Charles Thomas. He was an American Foreign Service officer, became friends with Garro.
Thomas, what's his connection to all of this?
Hold on tight because this gets even wilder. He didn't just work for the Foreign Service, he was with the CIA, Covert Action Staff.
Oh, wow. Now it's really getting interesting. CIA. This is a whole other level.
So we have Garro, we have Oswald, and now CIA. This is getting complicated.
Oh, it gets even more complicated. Thomas, he believed Garro, like really believed her.
Even though everyone else was dismissing her?
Yeah, he even wrote to the Secretary of State, urging him to investigate her claims further.
Wow, he was really invested in this.
He was, but, and this is the tragic part, Thomas, he committed suicide in 1971.
Oh, wow, that's awful.
It is. After he was dismissed from the Foreign Service.
Nah.
And he had been facing all these job rejections.
Makes you wonder, right? Was it connected to all of this, the Garro affair?
Yeah.
Or was it just, personal stuff, professional setbacks?
It's a question a lot of people have asked. And it's hard to say for sure, but what we do know is this. The Cold War, it was all about espionage. Disinformation was everywhere.
Right. So it was like their weapon of choice.
Basically. So could Garro's story, maybe even without her realizing it, become part of that, part of a bigger disinformation campaign?
Like she was a pawn in a bigger game.
It's not impossible. Maybe she really did see something, but her story got, I don't know, twisted, used for someone else's agenda.
That's kind of scary. So let's go back to that party, the one at Ruben Duran's house. If it did happen, who else was there? Did anyone back up Garro's story?
Good question, and a tough one to answer. Remember, Duran, he was Sylvia Duran's brother-in-law. She was the one working at the Cuban embassy.
Right, right. And Garro said the Cuban consul was there too, right? Eusebio Askew.
That's what she said. So we have Garro, we have Oswald, a Cuban embassy employee, and a Cuban consul, all at this party, weeks before Kennedy is shot.
That's a lot of coincidences.
It is. And Garro also said this Mexican government official was there, Manuel Calvillo. He was rumored to be like an undercover agent for Cuba.
Oh boy, this is a tangled web.
It is. And the thing is, none of these people, except Garro, have ever said anything about the party.
Why not, you think? I mean, if they were there, wouldn't they have had to talk to the investigators?
Maybe. Maybe not. Think about it. Speaking out against powerful governments like the U.S. or Cuba during the Cold War, that was risky.
I guess nobody wants to be caught in the middle of that.
Uh,
But wouldn't they have been obligated to cooperate with the investigations?
You'd think. But those investigations, they were pretty secretive. The Warren Commission, for example, a lot of people thought they were more worried about national security than finding the truth.
So even if these people knew something, they might have stayed quiet to protect themselves or to, go along with the official story.
Possibly. And we can't forget, some of these people, they might have been intelligence assets, bound by secrecy, maybe even working undercover. Their silence, it could have been a matter of national security.
This is like one of those mystery novels where every clue leads to more questions. So we're stuck. We have Garro's story, but no one to back her up. What else can we look at to try and figure this out?
Well, there's that letter, remember? The one postmarked before Oswald was supposed to be in Mexico City.
The one that messes up the timeline.
That's the one. If Oswald was there earlier than everyone thought, well, that changes things.
Yeah, it means he had more time to meet people, do things. Who sent that letter anyway?
A young guy, Ario Alejandro Lavanini Stanias. He also said he was at a party at the Gurin's house.
So another witness.
Well, kinda. He said he went to 2 parties there, but couldn't remember when exactly. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
Okay, so conflicting dates, no one backing up Garro's claims, and all these people potentially connected to intelligence agencies. This is getting hard to follow.
It definitely is a puzzle, but that's what makes it so fascinating. Even if we don't find all the answers, looking at all these details, it gives us a peek into what was going on back then, the forces at play.
It reminds us that we can't just take the official story at face value, right? Especially with something as big as the JFK assassination. We have to consider different perspectives, ask questions. What do you think? This whole thing is mind-blowing, isn't it? I mean, all these years later, and the JFK assassination still has so many mysteries. Every time you think you're getting close to an answer, bam, more questions pop up. What do you think is the most important thing we can take away from Elena Garro's story?
Yeah, it's definitely a case that keeps you guessing. But even with all the confusion, all the speculation, there are a few key things about Garro's account that really stand out to me. Things that I think help us understand why her story matters.
I'm all ears. Lay it on me.
Well, first of all, we got to remember who Garro was, right? A respected writer, not some random person looking for attention. Her words carried weight.
She had a reputation to uphold. And she didn't really have a reason to make up a story like this, did she? I mean, if anything, speaking out could have made her a target.
Exactly. And that brings us to the second point, the timing. She came forward so soon after the assassination. Before the Warren Commission, before any of the big theories took hold, her story came straight from her own experience.
So it's like a raw, unfiltered look at what was happening before that day in Dallas. That's got to be valuable, even if we can't prove every detail.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The official investigations, they just brushed her aside. Why do you think that was?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe because if her story was true, it would have meant Cuba was involved, right? And during the Cold War, that could have been really bad news.
Yeah, blaming Cuba could have started a whole other conflict. Or maybe, even if it wasn't intentional, Garro's story revealed stuff about intelligence operations, secrets that some people wanted to keep buried.
So even if she was telling the truth, it was just too dangerous to admit it publicly. That's a pretty disturbing thought.
It really shows you the dark side of intelligence work, the tough choices people had to make during the Cold War. And then there's the fact that Garro didn't have any hard evidence, just her memories, her observations.
So no other witnesses, no official records to back her up. It was easy to say she was unreliable or maybe even making things up.
It's a classic case of one person's word against the official story. And in those cases, doubt and uncertainty usually win. But that doesn't mean we should ignore Garro's story completely. It still gives us a glimpse into the JFK assassination, all the complexity, all the things we may never know for sure.
So let's say, just for a second, that Garro was telling the truth. What does that tell us about Oswald? About why he might have done what he did?
Now that's the million-dollar question. If she was right, it puts Oswald in direct contact with people connected to the Cuban government just weeks before Kennedy was killed.
So it supports the idea that maybe Oswald was working for Cuba, even if he didn't realize it?
Yeah, it definitely fits with that theory. But we have to be careful here. We're in speculation territory now. There's no smoking gun that proves Oswald's motives or that he was taking orders from Cuba.
Still, Garro's story adds another layer to the whole Oswald mystery. Makes you wonder, what was he really doing in Mexico City? Who was he meeting with? What was his real plan?
It just shows you that the JFK assassination wasn't some simple case. It was complicated, with different stories, conflicting accounts, and a lot of unanswered questions. Questions we may never have the answers to.
This deep dive has really made me think. It's a reminder that we should always question the official story, look at things from different angles, especially with something as important as the JFK assassination. What do you think, listeners? Was Elena Garro a key witness who stumbled onto something huge? Or was she just a pawn in a bigger game of disinformation? What do you believe?
Maybe she saw something she wasn't meant to see. And her story, whether it was completely true or embellished, it might have threatened someone powerful. It's up to each of us to weigh the evidence, look at all the possibilities, and decide for ourselves what role Elena Garro played in this whole JFK puzzle.
If you're as fascinated by this case as we are, we encourage you to keep digging. And a great place to start is Jim Powell's article in the Dealey Plaza Echo. It's packed with information and analysis. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.